Well, good afternoon and welcome back to the Johnson Space Center, and thanks for joining us on short notice. We're holding this ISS status briefing today to bring you up to date on developments on the station and upcoming activities. We only have 45 minutes today for the briefing due to other commitments by our briefers, so we'll get underway right now. And with us today are Mike Suffredini, the International Space Station Program Manager, and Norm Knight, the Chief of the Flight Director Office here at the Johnson Space Center. And we'll start off with Mike.
Good afternoon. We're here today to talk a little bit about an EVA that we're going to conduct tomorrow morning on the U.S. segment of the International Space Station. As many of you probably have seen in some videos, a little before lunchtime yesterday, the crew called down. They were seeing flakes of snow coming off the space station itself. You can see this in this video here. Consequently, about the same time, the ground team was looking at a data drop in quantities on the ammonia cooling system on what we call the 2B power system. It is one of the two power systems on the port outermost array set. And what the data was showing us was that the quantity was dropping. This is the system that has been leaking for some time. Actually had a very small leak for many years. Last summer, however, it took a bit of a turn for the worse, and as you might recall, we did an EVA. We weren't exactly sure what the leak source was, but if you looked at all the possible scenarios, an MMOD hit to the cooling radiator was a most likely cause. And so we sent the crew out in the November time frame to isolate that radiator and hook up to a radiator that we used in the early system on board ISS. That was a completely successful EVA, and over the last several months, 6 to 7 months since that time, the system has been operating well. The radiator we isolated has not been leaking, so the source of the leak is not there, and we continue to see a smaller leak, not quite as dramatic as before we did the EVA, about on the order of 5 pounds a year. But early yesterday morning, the data shows that changed significantly to about a 5-pound mass ammonia leak per day. And with that, it was predicted that the system would shut itself down by either late tonight or early tomorrow. So the first thing we did was we worked together as a team to move all those power loads off the 2B array, mostly to what we call the 2A array, and then shut down the system in order to preserve the ammonia as much as we can. And with that, we got very fortunate that the crew members we have on orbit have been out to this IEA before. In fact, we had done quite a bit of work on the change out of the pump in question as a preparatory act for the previous EVA we did in November. And so the team was really very ready to try to go outside and take a look at this. Our primary objective really is to try to get a look at the leak. When it's at this pressure and we're single phase in the lines, we produce this snow when we leak. But these cracks or holes or whatever is leaking is very, very small. And so once the leak goes down to a point where you don't see the snow anymore, it'd be very hard to find. Since the crew is prepared and our ops team is ready to go, we're going to get them outside and see if we can't lay eyes on the actual leak source. While we're there, the next most likely cause really is the pump itself and the QDs associated with the pump. So we're going to go ahead and change out that pump and see if we can't recover the system. Keep in mind that depending on how much ammonia is left, once we change the pump out, we may not be able to start the system right up. We may have to wait to a subsequent EVA to fill the system up. That'll depend on how much ammonia we lost between now and the EVA and whether or not the change out of the pump actually arrests the leak or not. So the team's ready to go. Norm is going to talk to you a little bit about that now. It does not affect the crew's departure. During this EVA, we'll use Tom, who's in the right seat of the Soyuz, and Chris Cassidy, who actually is going to remain on board when Tom and Chris Hatfield and Roman depart Monday afternoon. So we've got Tom's in good shape to go do the EVA and then get on board the Soyuz for a nominal return. And so we'll do the EVA tomorrow and bring the crew home on schedule on Monday. And so with that, I'll go ahead and let Norm tell you a few more of the details.
All right, thank you, Mike. The team's in good spirits. What I'm going to cover today is to give you some insight into what the team has been doing over the past 24 hours since this leak was detected, and talk about the activities that the crew has performed today in prep for the EVA, and then I'll talk a lot in detail about what tomorrow's activities are as well. Today, for the last 24 hours, the ops team and many other teams have been in a full court press to understand what the failure is. We did this several ways. First, we acquired a great deal of imagery. We have cameras on the external truss and external modules of station that provided some very good insight into to the leak that some of the video that Mike showed you earlier. We also had the crew perform some handheld camcorder video as well to provide that insight as well. So we got a lot of imagery. We've narrowed it down to the P6 solar array and in the IEA type area. And you saw that video earlier, and I'll show you some graphics here in just a few minutes. So the imagery helped tremendously in being able to pinpoint this. And that also led into the EVA planning. So the EVA planning, again, we hit the ground running 24 hours ago, knowing that we needed to get out to the P6. As Mike mentioned, the crew is very familiar with this area, so we're very fortunate that they've had experience in this area. So the planning went on all night. We put together a timeline and have a very good idea of what is required to go out and effect a change out and provide some visual inspections once they're out there, and I'll go through that in detail in a little bit. But I'd be remiss not to mention that there is a lot of analysis that goes into this. There's a lot of work behind the scenes that's taking place throughout the night to make this possible. So there's a lot of teams doing a lot of good work to get us where we think we'll be ready to go out the door tomorrow morning. So today's activities, the crew woke up at around 1 a.m. and we're very excited to hear that they would be going out the door possibly Saturday. And so that made for a very happy day on their part. They have been doing EVA prep activities today, suit resizing, looking at the procedures. The ground team has done an excellent job of getting the procedures on board so that the crew can review those. They've had conferences with the ground. In fact, on the way over here, I got a report that the crew was talking with the ops team and going over those procedures, and they feel real good about them. And we were working out some last minute details. So things are really progressing in the right direction. The crew will be going to bed at around 16:30 Central Time, and we'll get up tomorrow morning bright and early for their EVA day. So tomorrow they will wake up around 1 a.m. Central Daylight Time. EVA prep will begin at around 2:15 in the morning, and that will conclude with hatch opening around 7:15 a.m. Central Time. So that'll be very exciting. Once outside, the crew will spend about 45 minutes getting their tools configured, getting all their tethers configured, and start heading out to the work site. And if we can go to the first visual coming up here, there we go. That's the work site that they will be at. It's labeled the 2B PFCS, and what's denoted there in yellow is a pump package. Their work site is about 150 feet away from the airlock, so they will transit out along the truss on the port side to the solar array that you see there in the picture, and the work site that's denoted with the red arrow. Once at the work site, what they will be doing is performing a visual inspection. If we can go to the second graphic. They'll be performing a visual inspection around the area in yellow there depicted, and that will provide better insight and complement the imagery that we gained yesterday to try to pinpoint where this leak is. So we're going to gather as much information as we can from the visual standpoint, and the crew will then take that PFCU out. There are two lock bolts that run up and down in the picture there, and there's two quick disconnects that are actuated with two bolts on the left and right side of that yellow box. So they will take that box out and they will temp stow it. The crew will then perform a visual inspection down in the bay where that box came out. They will also look up under the box to make sure that there is nothing anomalous or anything that could provide some insight as to where this leak might be originating from. If we go to the graphic on number 3, that's the box in question. And if you see there on what's depicted as H1 and H2, those are the 2 bolts that will release the quick disconnects. Those are what interfaces the ammonia system to the pumps that are inside that box and provides the flow through the integrated electronic assembly and radiators in the system. The other 2 bolts, the H3 and H4, are the structural bolts which hold it down into the bay. And we can go to the next graphic, and it provides a nice view of the underside of this box. It's aluminum structure, and the 2 conical cones that you see there are the 2 structural bolts, and you can see the QDs towards the front of the picture on either side. So the crew will temp stow that box. They'll get some imagery. The ground team will look at that as well, and then they will translate out several feet to pick up the spare pump package. They will remove that from the spare platform. They will put it in and replace the hopefully anomalous pump package. Bolt that down, integrate the QDs in, and then take and stow the anomalous pump package back in that slot. And that really concludes most of the activities that are going to be objectives that we want out of the EVA. At this point, they're going to do a visual inspection. We know there's ammonia in the area, as evidenced by the video that Mike showed earlier. So they'll do a visual inspection of each other to make sure that there's no ammonia ice on their suits. And once they have concluded that they are clean, that starts a bake-out timer. And we do that to make sure that we have adequate time for any hidden ammonia that might be on the suits to evaporate. And on rough order of magnitude, 30 to 45 minutes is required for that bake-out time. So they will, that clock starts, and they will begin their transit back to the airlock down the P6 truss. And once they get in the airlock, they will hook up on umbilicals. They will repress the airlock to around 5 psi and perform a test. It's a Draeger tube, and it's just a simple way of detecting how much ammonia might be in the atmosphere at that 5 psi level. And based on that, we'll make a determination of if there's contamination or not. If consumables permit, they may do a second test. We don't anticipate that to be required. And if consumables don't permit, then they'll go ahead and press the airlock up and come back into station. So we're looking forward to a very good day tomorrow. A lot of hard work, full court press, and we're real excited. That's all I have, Rob.
Okay, thanks, Norm. We'll take questions now, starting here at JSC with Robert Perlman.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. You mentioned that you were fortunate to have crew members who've worked in this area before. Did that drive the desire to do this EVA now before the undocking and not waiting for the next crew to come up, or what were the pressing needs to do this so quickly?
That's a good question. I would say it a little differently. The fact that these 2 crew members have been out before and done an EVA together in this area is one of the many factors that allowed us to do the EVA before they departed. The system, the ISS, is fine with 7 of 8 channels, and so we really don't need to rush for that reason. As I tried to say earlier today, one of the unique opportunities here is that the leak is big enough and the conditions are right, at least at this phase of the leak down, that if we can get in there and actually see the origin of the leak because it's still emitting snow, ammonia snow, then we have a chance of figuring out the source of the leak, obviously, and then what we're going to do about it. Oftentimes, these leaks are so small that if it's not snowing, you won't notice it with just eyeballs staring at the metal. You're talking about very, very small holes or cracks, and so they'll be difficult to identify if we lose these conditions. So that's really what's driving us outside. It's really not the need to get the power system back that quick. It's really we have a unique opportunity until the pressures go down much more to actually visually identify if in fact it's in an area where we can get to, but to visually identify the source of the leak.
And a follow-up for Norm. Given how quickly this plan came together, how does this compare to other unplanned EVAs that have been done over the station's life? you getting better at pulling together a quick plan for EVA, or was this just a unique situation given the experience in the area?
I would categorize it as taking the totality of experience level, need to go out, and maturity of some plans that we already had in work with respect to, we look ahead for failed mechanisms, failed systems, and have preliminary plans on the books so we have a pretty good idea of what's required to go effect a repair if we need it. That combined with the fact that the crew is, like Mike said, very trained. They're familiar with the area. It's almost a perfect setup. So this is definitely a full court press. It's definitely a stress on the ops team. They're doing great. And we're in constant contact with the crew, making sure that everybody is in sync with what's required and that we're safe to go out the door. And we're going to finish up those final reviews later today, but everything looks great. And from a big picture standpoint, this is a pretty good full court press. We did EVAs on shuttle flights that were unexpected, but from a station standpoint, this is probably one of the faster ones that we've had to put together and go out and effect a repair.
Okay, we can pursue the phone bridge now with a bunch of reporters there. Mark Carreau, Aviation Week, you're up first.
Thank you. What is your plan if the first spacewalk doesn't locate the leak? It becomes so elusive that you have to do some more work with spacewalkers. Who does that duty fall to then?
Well, we've been very clear about that the plan for this EVA really is to see if we can identify the leak. After this EVA, we probably will have run out of ammonia in the system to the point where we probably couldn't reliably expect to be able to ID the leak. So we're taking this opportunity to try to find the leak. If we miss it, then the likely plan of action after that is just to have the crew call an EVA. We'll let Tom go ahead and go home. We'll wait for the next crew to come out, and we'll devise a more thorough plan for trying to identify the anomaly. Again, we're going to change out, the plan is to change out the pump on this particular EVA. It's the most likely source is associated with the pump itself. So there's a very good chance we'll get the change out done. We'll solve this problem with the change out of the pump itself.
Mark, did you have a follow-up?
Have you had to power off anything, or do you plan to, I guess is the better question. If you can't find the leak, will you have to start powering down equipment on the station? With 7 of 8 channels, you get total power, you get plenty of power, and so we should be able to operate all of our normal loads. It really becomes a channelization question about which channels need which power based on what systems you're trying to draw on. So I would tell you with 7 of 8 channels, we'll operate all the nominal loads we need to operate, and the ops team has to do a little bit more work to make that happen. Maybe turn off a shell heater here or there to make sure the loads are working, but that's not uncommon work for the ops team to do.
Okay, next up is Carl Franzen from The Verge. Carl, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Go ahead, Carl.
Sorry about that, I was muted. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us about this operation today and the issue. I did want to ask about, you had pointed out that the estimate on as to, if this leak were allowed to continue, when it would cause the system to shut down automatically, that I believe you'd said something to the effect of that would occur either later this evening or tomorrow morning, and so you went ahead and shut it off, preventatively. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, you do. It doesn't save you a whole lot, but once you shut the pump down, we think we could have slowed the leak a little bit and saved us a bit more time. But I'm talking, a handful of hours perhaps. So it wasn't a dramatic saving, but we're trying to gain every bit of extra time we can get to get the crew outside and hope still, being able to spot the location of the leak itself.
And again, so just to follow up on that, I mean, so if you're unable to fix the leak in a timely fashion, there's a obviously a time limit on as to how long the EV A can occur. What happens then? I mean, is it what would, I guess I'm asking not necessarily what action NASA would take, but what would technically happen to the pump once all the ammonia runs out? I mean, what would happen then?
Well, now the system is shut down and it's in a passive state. So at this point, it just leaks ammonia and it'll just keep leaking. It'll take many days to completely leak out all the ammonia. But once you get the ammonia in a kind of a two-phase state or even just a vapor state over time, you can't really run it. So you reach a point in the system accumulator where once we get to a certain level in the accumulator, 4% is what we use, then the system will shut itself down. And that's the point at where we want to make sure the pump is off, because at that point you'll cavitate the pump and potentially damage it. So that's already been done though. So from a protect the pump standpoint, we're in a safe condition for the pump, and it can stay like this indefinitely.
Okay, next up is Seth Borenstein, Associated Press.
Yes, thank you for doing this. I have one question and a follow-up. Mike, just in general, if you've, let's say you cannot fix this and you're down to the 7 channels, you said you have enough power, you can do the whole system. I guess this is a two-part question. Is it possible in a later, it sounds like it's possible in a later EVA, months or weeks down the line, to still fix it after it goes down? I mean, in other words, this isn't your last chance. And then secondly, if this is never fixed, what's the fewest number of channels you need? I mean, what's the minimum requirement? And afterwards, if it's so much, if you're under that, you have to look at drastic actions.
Well, let's see. The first answer is yes. We've got many more ideas up our sleeves. We're trying to postulate what the leak source is. Typically, it's moving parts that eventually fail, or you get an MMOD strike. A lot of the lines are buried underneath the IEA, so it's hard to believe we have an MMOD strike. But we have been discussing for years and have components available for actually repairing hoses, tubes, if they in fact have MMOD damage. And we have a very creative team, so we've got a lot of opportunities to recover this system if it's not the pump itself that's the cause of the anomaly. To answer your other question, I'd have to get back to you exactly. I know we've done this analysis several times. 7 requires channelization. I think once you go below 7, we probably have to manage loads a little more dramatically, meaning we probably can't operate everything when we want to, but we will sequentially operate some things based on loads on channels. So it becomes a much larger operational challenge if we lose the next channel system. And I'd say somewhere in that phase then we'll start having to manage closer how we operate the research. Today we're not really bound by that, and so it's not a challenge for us. So in the future we'd probably have to look closer at it. I don't know if we'd have to not do research, as much research as we've been doing, but it would certainly be much more challenging for our operations friends to have to manage the loads across the different channels at that point.
Is this the, and maybe more for Norm, this is you have a 24-hour basically turnaround here between the time the problem popped up and the time you're going out, or maybe a little bit more. Just putting this in range of past sort of impromptu spacewalks, is this the most pressing or the most short notice? Can you give me a sense of context of this and other repair? I mean, most EVAs are long charted and long practiced and everything. This isn't. Is there been anything quite like this in terms of suddenness?
On the station program, during an increment, I think this is precedent setting. When you back up and you look at the assembly flights that we've had and some of the issues that we've had to go address, you might go into a shuttle flight with a station assembly mission thinking that you were going to do 3 EVAs, and then based on circumstances that presented themselves, you may have to add a 4th EVA or change the content of one of the other EVAs. So we have that experience from our shuttle station joint mission days in the past. From a purely station perspective, during an increment, I would say this is precedent setting.
Okay, we go to Miriam Kramer from Space.com.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this. Miriam Fair with Space.com. I was just curious, I'm sorry if you've answered this already, but what could have caused this? Is the idea that it's still probably micrometeorites, or could it be something else? Thanks.
Well, I guess that's what we're trying to figure out. First of all, you don't know if it's related to the leaks that we've been dealing with. This may just be masking the leak we already have, so it's hard to know. MMOD is certainly a concern, although many of the lines are underneath the IEA. The IEA is the platform that this pump is sitting on top of, as well as the batteries and the battery chargers that are sitting up there as well. So this thing is full of ORUs, or components, sitting on top of a relatively large plate. And so an MMOD strike to get to some of those tubes would have to go through an ORU, in which case the ORU would probably tell us it was experiencing a problem, and then get through the plate and into the tube. So MMOD at the tube level is less likely. MMOD at the hit of the pump is possible. We may have been dealing with a seal issue. There's 4 face seals across these two QDs that Norm mentioned to you earlier, any one of which over time perhaps could have been leaking and slowly gotten worse. If that's the case, the seals themselves, the Teflon seals themselves, are on the ORU, so when we change out the pump, we'll fix that problem. There's not many moving parts that are exposed to the outside environment. You just see the pump and all of there's some hoses and flex hoses inside the pump box itself, but it's sealed up, so if any of that had failed, it wouldn't show itself as an external leak. So, really you're dealing with some sort of failure, seal failure more likely. MMOD is possible, and then just a spurious crack of some sort that went all these years before it failed is possible, but I think highly unlikely.
Okay, we're going to move to Ken Kramer of Universe Today.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. 2 quick questions. I was wondering, this pump assembly, if you do change it out, do you have additional spares? And could you bring up additional equipment also on Cygnus and Dragon if you find you need other spares? Thanks.
Yeah, we have 3 spare pumps on orbit, so we're in good shape. And the SpaceX vehicle and the HTV vehicle carry external ORUs. This is relatively large, about 260 pounds, so I probably couldn't bring it up inside. Sometimes we've done that. But certainly SpaceX and the HTV vehicles could take up another spare when the time comes. But clearly it's not urgent.
Okay, thanks. Next up, Rebecca Boyle from Popular Science.
Hi, thanks. One of my questions was just answered, but I was asked, is there any science experiments that are in jeopardy or in close proximity to this particular pump that might need to be moved or shut down or otherwise affected?
Not that we've mentioned. It's really a small amount of ammonia coming out. It's the very end of the truss. So from an environment standpoint, this really hasn't put any of the experiments at risk. Many of them actually are on the starboard side anyway of the external experiments.
I guess just as a follow-up, will you be able to determine, or do you think you might be able to determine what caused this, if it was some sort of orbital debris or a crack? Will they be able to figure that out?
If we can find it and see it, then absolutely, I think we could probably figure that out. You're talking very, very, very small hole. So MMODs make kind of a unique signature when they're done. They usually leave raised up lips around the outer edges. Cracks do kind of show themselves a little bit differently, but if we can visually identify it, we probably could determine whether it was an MMOD hit or not. But it would be challenging, but I would say probably so. The hard part's just going to be to identify the location if it's not in the pump.
Okay, next up is Jeff Bromfield from National Public Radio.
Oh, hi. I guess so. If you can't repair this, I mean, do you feel comfortable leaving the crew complement on orbit and continuing everything as it is?
Absolutely. That's why we have 8 power systems, so we have the redundancy we need to keep operating while we get the power systems back. And we've been down a power system before, and In fact, we had a couple of challenges with two power systems at the same time for a little while there last year. So the system is built this way to give us the redundancy so we can have problems, have time to work problems, and meanwhile continue to do the research that this ISS was meant to do.
Okay, on to Alan Boyle from NBC News.
Hi, I just had a couple of quick follow-up questions. One was, I didn't hear how long this spacewalk was expected to take. Are there contingencies? Could it last longer or shorter? And then also just Ken Kramer's question about what the ammonia supply on board was like.
Let's see, I'll cover the first one. The EVA is planned for around 6 hours, 15 minutes. And we have consumables to support that and likely consumables to go a little bit longer if we need to. Typically in the EVA, once we get going, we'll get a better understanding of the crew's metabolic rates, which results in how much carbon dioxide is taken out of the air that they breathe. And that's really typically our limiting factor. So once we get going, we'll reassess that, and that tells us how much time we have after 6 hours and 15 minutes. But right now, what we think can get done, what we need to get done can get affected in about 6 hours and 15 minutes, maybe 6:30.
And the ammonia question, the way we're set up is the port side central system tanks will be used to recharge the port side system, and the starboard central system would take care of the starboard power systems if we had to ever fill them. So this is on the port side. The port side ammonia tanks has about 500 pounds left in them. They hold about 600 total, so they're pretty full. It needs about 100 pounds to fully fill the system, and so we've got plenty of ammonia. Actually, the bigger challenge, and it's not a dramatic challenge, but it's a challenge, is the amount of nitrogen we have. It takes a certain amount of nitrogen from the nitrogen tanks to push the ammonia out. That tank on that side is getting a little low. We do have spare tanks full of nitrogen, so we could do that. I suspect we wouldn't need to do that to do this fill. If we change out the pump now and that turns out to be the source of the leak, I suspect we'll recharge the system without needing to change out nitrogen tanks.
Thank you.
Okay, on to Carrie Sheridan from FP. Carrie, are you there? Okay, we'll skip on to James Dean from Florida Today.
Thank you. Sorry if I missed this. What is the approximate size and mass of the box that's being replaced?
The dimensions evade me right this second. Norm, do you remember? It's 260 pounds is the pounds is the pounds. 260 pounds is the weight of the box. It's hard to do. It's large. It's a large box.
Okay, so this isn't like the type of a box or hardware that you'd ever consider taking back to the ground for further analysis. Too big?
The answer is I probably would not bring it home, correct. The question you're asking is, could I bring it inside? I wouldn't bring a leaking ammonia system inside the ISS, and that's the only way to bring it home. So size-wise, while I might be able to squeeze it inside if I wanted to, I wouldn't want to bring in a system leaking ammonia into the ISS.
Right. Okay. Thanks. You couldn't use okay. I thought maybe can't use the arm or something. Yeah.
Well, I can get it, but I don't have a way to bring unpressurized components home in an unpressurized environment. The only thing we have to return today is through a pressurized system, so I have to eventually bring it inside to get it home.
Thank you.
Okay, and finally on the list, Bill Harwood, CBS News.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mike, help me characterize this in your mind anyway. It's like you said that you can get along fine with 7 power channels. Crew's not in any danger. The Soyuz is going to depart on time. But obviously, I'm just trying to understand if this is a serious issue, a critical thing you need to get fixed, if it's more of an annoyance at this point. Would you put it in whatever terms you like to help me understand the seriousness of this problem? Thank you.
Well, Bill, it's I would tell you right this very instant, because I don't know any better, I'd tell you it's an annoyance because of all the work we have to do to work around the problem. After the EVA, if we change out the pump and the pump's not the cause of the problem, then it's going to take us quite a bit of time I imagine it will take us quite a bit of time to figure out where this leak could be, identify it, isolate it, overcome it, fix it however we're going to, and then recharge the system. So if we have to be down one power system for a long period of time, that is a significant impact to us. And it's a significant impact because the next failure is so much work on the ops team, and could potentially have impact to research. I think we'd be really stressing the ops team during the period that the other channel was down. I think we could manage things and probably stay pretty close to getting all the research done that we needed to do. But it'd be a big challenge for the team, and so we'd have to quickly, perhaps more quickly than we otherwise would, have to recover whatever was causing that next channel to be down. And so that in and of itself has an impact to research. So I would tell you, while it's not critical from a safety standpoint, it becomes, if we have to live with this channel down for a long period of time while we sort it out, it very definitely is going to have impacts to research from time to time if we lose the next power system. Does that make sense? I lost Bill.
Bill, you still there? Okay, he must have been satisfied then.
Or I completely baffled him, one of the
completely
two.
Baffled him. All right, so having wrapped up the questions, a couple of notes before we close. One more box to check in this regard. The ISS mission management team will be meeting in a formal session later today to give its formal ratification for tomorrow's spacewalk. Assuming that all happens, or once that meeting is completed, we'll update the NASA website at www.nasa.gov with the latest information following their meeting. It's worth noting also that Chris Cassidy will be EV1 tomorrow, wearing the suit bearing the red stripes. Tom Marshburn, EV2, wearing the suit with no stripes. They've each had 3 EVAs to their credit, all conducted on STS-127 and 2 with each other on that flight. Assuming the spacewalk is approved for tomorrow, we'll begin our coverage on NASA television at 6 a.m. Central Time, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. The spacewalk, as mentioned earlier, will begin around 7:15 a.m. Central Time, 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time. And after the spacewalk, we'll have a post-spacewalk briefing with Mike Suffredini and the team that will be executing the spacewalk on Saturday. That will be no earlier than about 3:30 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, perhaps a bit later. So with that, we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you with our EVA coverage tomorrow morning. Thanks very much.